Cup champions.
Well, welcome in, everyone, to the Cluster Puck podcast, part of the MHRT Network here at Center Ice. I am Nik. Beside me here is Brit, and we are very, very excited to be part of this network, to bring you this podcast here. And I'm ready to talk some Avalanche. I don't know about you. We're the newest kids on the block, but we're here to make some noise. Brittany, how are we feeling?
I'm feeling good. I feel like if anything comes out of this podcast, it is a fantastic intro video. So it's got me ready to go.
Yep. So a little bit might have been cut off. Looks like there was a little bit of a segment, but we're well underway. So a little bit about us. We're going to go ahead and just get this first episode started. Really relatively simple. We're going to give our impressions first on the Stanley Cup and their playoff run and our emotions and feelings on how we felt about it. So Brittany, if you want to go first as far as how you felt, especially during the playoffs, how you thought it was going to go, and obviously at the very end when we ended up winning it.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to have anything but faith throughout most of the run. There was some shaky points there, but it's a heck of a time to start a podcast as high as humanly possible. It's been a long couple of years. So winning that was so good. I mean, I get goosebumps even watching the videos, seeing those final moments of that championship game and seeing guys like Eric Johnson and McKinnon. I just don't feel like many people deserve it more than them. So I'm still feeling good, and watching those videos and seeing that just brings it all back. And it feels like they just finished up the season 20 minutes ago, but then also at the same time, like it was a year ago. So I'm definitely ready to get going. Even if feels like it might be a shaky start, I'm ready to go on and just do it again. And I feel like we can.
I definitely agree. My thoughts when we first, so we made the playoffs. I was very hopeful, obviously. However, I would be lying to you if I thought, just like the last however many years, all we would do is hit that second round bump and then get knocked out for some reason. And just kind of looking at the schedule and whatnot, you're like, okay, Nashville, you thought you'd be able to do just fine against them, but then you'd be like, well, you're facing the winner of Minnesota and St. Louis, talking about last year. And I thought, that's a team that, whoever wins out of that one, that's going to be probably your toughest out of the West. Because the Pacific I felt like it didn't have too much power. But that's not to say that they didn't do a good job. So obviously you roll through Nashville, you sweep them. And so you're feeling great. You're rested for a week. And then obviously you see St. Louis win. That's a team that for me it's tough competition, right? So we get through that. Right. That was the most amazing part. And to see like Darren Helm with like 6 seconds left send you to the next round. I remember where I was. My wife and I were driving in the car, and I couldn't watch that last game 6 just because I was like, I just know we're going to lose because we had the lead in the series. And I was like, we're going to lose it. I'm just not happy. And I told my wife not to tell me the scores and stuff like that until the very end. And then I'd be like either really happy or really disappointed. And she kind of like gasped a little bit when she saw the final score. And she's like, well, the score is final. And I was like, just tell me. And she's like, the Avalanche won. Like they moved on. Darren Helm scored with 6 seconds left. So obviously when we got out of the car, when we get to our destination, I'm looking at all the highlights and I'm just jumping up and down. So we moved on, right? And which made me very happy. Edmonton comes into town with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in tow. And what made me most nervous about them was, in fact, their offensive firepower. But again, you sweep through that. And nonetheless, most of those games are being played with Pavel Francouz, which is incredible. right? And of course, it's Arturi Lehkonen that sends you to the final. Go figure. He's done it for his other when he was in Montreal. He did it for them the year prior, and obviously we pick him up in the offseason. He does that, and I remember we gave our thoughts on another podcast, just how excited we were and whatnot. So the run just to the cup, as soon as we got to the final, I thought there's nothing that could stop us,
Right.
even being Tampa. Right.
Yeah, it felt like the road to the final was scarier than the final.
It did, because go and that game one where it was really close, but then game two we just blew them out of the water. I feel like that exposed Tampa in a way that, even though they fought back and got 2 games of their own, I felt like at that game two, it was pretty much in hand.
Yeah.
So as soon as you win the cup, obviously there's just an influx of emotions going through your brain and your body. Your hands are like shaking nervously. I just remember I was repeating, we won the cup, and I'm bawling, right? I'm literally bawling because this is something you waited years to say, and to see your team do it, and I don't know, I'm still on an emotional high, right? And it's an incredible feeling.
Yeah, well, and that's I was at a bar in Iowa when we won, so there wasn't a lot of mutual excitement besides myself and the 5 fans that joined me. Yeah, it's and I grew up playing goalie, so I have this mentality that the game's not over. I assume even if we're up 5-1 with 5 seconds left, there's still that chance that they can score 4 goals in 5 seconds, because I never trust the game is over until the buzzer goes off. So up until that last second was just it still doesn't even feel real sometimes, and we're getting ready to start over again. We do have a couple comments real quick, Nick. Do we want to address some people, just give a little bit about ourselves?
Absolutely. I think so. In fact, I think there was a comment right here that just says, case by case sports show. It says, to be honest, I would like to know who you two are, Brit and Nick, where you two are from, how long have you two been Avs fans, and how did you become an Avs fan? So why don't you go ahead and start us off, Brittany?
So my name is Brit, and thank you for the compliment on my fish tank. It's actually my husband's fish tank, so he'll be tickled to see that somebody noticed that and enjoyed it. So I am turning 33 next week, my more golden birthday, my Patrick Waugh birthday. I've been playing hockey since I was about 10. I grew up a bit in Colorado. Colorado is kind of where we claim home as my family, and I most of my middle school and high school years in Rapid City, South Dakota, where we started the girls team there. And then I moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. My senior year, we won the state championship there. So after that, I went up and played juniors in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. And it was an awesome experience. Playing and learning and watching and loving hockey in northern Minnesota is an experience that I would definitely recommend to anyone. It's an incredible place. It's a shame that I hate the Wild so much, because I would love to love them. But my family is all, my dad's big Broncos fans. We're just straight ticket Colorado fans. So, except for the Rockies, as everyone, we love them, but it's not the best time to be a Rockies fan, basically, since I was like 9. Now I am in Sioux City, Iowa. I have a 8-year-old son who plays hockey. I still play. And like I said, I'm a goalie. So I definitely come at it with a hockey with a different mindset than most people, because I do play goalie, and that's my Greyhound's butt in the background there. I have 3 dogs and a husband who is a pilot in the Air Force. And that is the only thing that could have brought me to Iowa, is my husband's military career. So we hope to make it to some games in Colorado, and hopefully in the future find ourselves living in Colorado, because I would enjoy a Stanley Cup win in Colorado a lot more than a Stanley Cup win in Iowa.
Couldn't agree more with you. That could not agree more. Well, my name is Nick Bixel. I reside in Orem, Utah currently. Now, how long I've been an Avs fan, there have been a couple of times where I've answered this question, but as far as this, I guess, tenure, if you want to call it, goes, probably not since, I think, like 2016 is when I really got into the game of hockey and became an Avs fan. But the roots of it, I guess you could call it, start back to 2001 when I saw the Avalanche win the Stanley Cup for what would have been their second time. And I remember seeing, I don't remember if it was a video or just or something. I think it was, but it was of Joe Sakic handing off the trophy to Ray Bourque, because obviously he had tried for all of his career to get it, and then obviously he goes to the Avalanche and takes on that mantle, and they win the cup. So back then, remember, I'm in my late mid-20s, right? So I was probably about 6 or so when this happened. So, thinking about that, you have to, as a kid, and coming into sports and stuff like that, you have to have a favorite team, right? You just have to. That's how it is. You have to be on someone's side. You have to root for them for all things. So I just remember that I saw them win the Stanley Cup. And for me, hockey wasn't like the biggest thing in the world. And here in Utah, we have the Grizzlies, right, which are the pipeline from the Colorado Avalanche. They're the ECHL affiliate. But really, it's not much of a hockey state. So hockey wasn't really much in the foreground for me. But I was like, well, it's a sport. I have to have a favorite. Fast forward, and like I said, for all those years, I only just remembered Colorado Avalanche are my favorite team. So we fast forward up to 2016, and I am watching a hockey game, and ironically, it's the Colorado Avalanche. Somehow, then this was during one of the really bad years, one that it's like Voldemort. We just don't want to talk about it. But I decided to give hockey another shot. And I really enjoyed it. Now, did I understand anything about it? Absolutely not. I just liked the fast pace, the hard hitting. It was intriguing. And that game just happened to be nationally televised. So I kind of set out on a quest essentially to learn more about the game of hockey. And since I said I am a Colorado Avalanche fan, they're going to be the team, even though I looked at the stats and I was like, maybe I should pick somebody else. Penguins were like the team that year, but I stuck with them, So I'm going through and kind of learning the game a little bit more and more. And then I meet my wife, and my wife is a big hockey fan, right? And I was like, trying to impress her, I guess, with my hockey talk and stuff like that, even though about 50% of which I'm like, I really hope I know what I'm talking about, right? But we end up dating and getting married and whatnot. But that right there, just having her as that support force, driving my fandom for hockey, then for the game itself, and that's where I learned the history and the players and how to pronouncing names, and then all about lines, shift changes, offensive and defensive zones, penalties, and learning that game to a point where I am, in fact, now co-hosting a hockey podcast. So that's exactly, the story as far as how I got to where I am. So good question, though, case by case. We do appreciate that.
Yeah.
So moving on to
and I always tell people it's a good time to jump on the bandwagon.
It is a great time. In fact, if you're top of the mountain,
I have no problem.
You might as well. You honestly might as well. So that's a very good question, case by case, like you said. So we'll go ahead and move on. We gave our impressions of the Stanley Cup, and obviously we've got a lot of stuff going on as far as Stanley Cup. Brett, you're wearing the Stanley Cup shirt. I got a few stickers and stuff like that elsewhere and whatnot. I actually, as soon as they won that day, I bought the glass puck full of game-used ice from one of the games, because I was like, I gotta have history, I have to.
I love it. I know. I'm still bummed I didn't get one of those champagne bottles.
I know. Wouldn't that have been fun? Like are you talking about the unused ones or the used ones? Because I know those guys just used and abused them in the locker room.
I don't even the decorative ones. I don't know who even released them. When I went to go look them up, they were super sold out. But it was a beautiful Stanley Cup champion bottle that was kind of reminiscent of the Stanley Cup. but I'd imagine they'll start popping up probably on eBay pretty soon for 9 times what they were originally.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. Chris, it looks like he's checking out Locked On Avs, but thanks for saying hi.
There he is. Thank you so much, Chris.
Done, yeah.
Yep. Have fun on that preseason. We'll actually get more to on that preseason here in just a minute. But first, I want to go through this offseason. So we've won the Stanley Cup. We think that we're going to essentially try to keep the same team together. So obviously that doesn't happen entirely. You have large pieces such as the goalie, Darcy Kemper, who essentially says, I'm one and done, peace out, and rides off into the distance off to Washington, D.C. Then you have Andre Burakovsky, who was hot and cold, but at the same time, he was still a good player to have. Yeah. And then you obviously have Nazem Kadri, who he had the year of his career last year with the Avalanche, and they don't come back, right? What were your thoughts when they, obviously Darcy was really early on. He signs elsewhere. Nazem leaves. Burakovsky leaves. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously most notable is Kadri and Berkey and Kemper. And I worked hard to be a Kemper stan. As a goalie, I'm generally sympathetic to goalies. And I'm usually either in love or completely out of love. And Kemper was one that I wanted to love so bad. And I kind of thought for a minute, maybe he'll stay, especially with us winning the cup. You always want to think that they'll take less to stay with us because we just won a cup and we could do it again. But I'm okay with seeing Kemper leave. And I think that we proved that we have a team that can win through even mediocre goalie. We just basically need someone to hold the fort. We don't necessarily need someone to win games for us always, but we just have been lacking, honestly. I mean, when you think about it, since Patrick Waugh retired, we haven't had a goalie that we could rely on in big moments on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much since Patrick Waugh. And seeing him go hurt as a goalie, I'm definitely in tune. I'm very curious to see how he's going to do in Washington, who happens to be my number 2 team. So that's an interesting thing that he left. So we'll see. I love TJ Oshie. So fortunately, if it's not affecting the Avs directly, which I don't see the Caps as being a big, too big of a even playoff run team this year, considering their injuries, they're looking pretty dry right now, but we'll see. I think that he's going to struggle without a really strong defense, because you have to consider any goalie leaving our team they're going to deal with a lot more from their defense. But Kemper is also a goalie that has proved that he stands on his head when he's faced with big adversity. Playing with the Coyotes, he seemed to play better most times than he did playing with Cale Makar in front of him. So we'll see on that one. Kadri was essentially the driving point of my mood all summer. I went through this roller coaster of it was like he's not going to stay, and then there was a little bit of hope, and then there was a little bit of resentment, and then there was newfound hope, and then it was straight up despair. And it was like, buddy, you got to stay or go no matter what it is, because I need to settle this emotionally. So seeing him go wasn't super surprising. I kind of thought that he would get more, obviously, to leave. I thought he would stay for a little bit less, but I heard that he texted the group chat and basically said, I don't give any freebies, and bounced from the group chat before anybody.
Oh my gosh.
Reply. So he is not, there's no loyalty or leftover love on the ice from him. So I'll be curious to see how that goes. And everybody's got a lot of concern about us losing him and Burakovsky and Kemper, but I mean, when you think about it, I don't think many other teams in the top 5 or even top 10, everybody thinks the Avs got worse, but I really don't think any of those top teams got significantly better. If anything, I think there's a plateau for everyone with that cap crunch. A lot of the bottom teams, you've got Ottawa getting better, but they're not going to be pushing anyone out of the playoffs, I don't think. So I don't think in the top tiers there was really a lot of shuffle and talent. I think it's just going to come down to pure determination again, and honestly, the luck of the draw with injuries. So hopefully we can see a healthier goalie in Georgiev, because that's a constant issue that we've had is goalie injuries. So it would be nice to see him stay healthy, and I think that'll be a big factor as far as whether he's a good acquisition or not, is if he can play enough games to actually get some stride.
Yeah, and one thing kind of with Georgiev, I know the Avalanche brought him in really early, and to answer Avatar's question here, it was, he says, I think the only reason Kemper left was because the Avs traded for a goalie from the Rangers. That obviously we're talking about Alexander Georgiev. I think what essentially you knew going into this, that you knew Kadri was going to ask for a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Burakovsky more or less was going to ask for a substantial amount, and Darcy Kemper, having won the Stanley Cup as a goalie, is also going to ask for a lot. So for a money standpoint, it would be very, very difficult to keep all three of those, unless you just make some trades with other people. I know a lot of people are spitting out Samuel Girard's name, JT Compher's name also came up, stuff like that. However, I'm also of the opinion that the core of our team itself, our defense and our scoring capability, I think is still enough to a point where it shouldn't necessarily matter who you have in net. Now, that being said, when Georgiev signed, obviously it was a little bit of a surprise, just because you'd think you'd want to have someone a little bit more seasoned than what Alex is right now. The only difference of that being is that he, from what you do see on those highlights and stuff like that, when he does have a hot streak, as soon as he gets like time and ice under his feet and playing time, he develops really well.
Absolutely.
Right. The only problem with Georgiev back in New York is he was living in Igor Shesterkin's shadow, reigning Vezina Trophy winner. Exactly. Yep. So I think, they had to make the move of, well, we know we can still score. We are, the game that we always played, at least this last season, was we can outscore you.
Yes.
Right. So long as obviously the offense and defense does what they're supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, we'll bring in some guy who has promise, right? Because that's what they did with Grubauer as well. And he obviously became the starting goal and ended up being a Vezina finalist. So they said, we'll bring in this goalie who has promise and essentially see where it goes. Because the thing is, it can either go really well or it can either go really bad. Now, if it does go bad, you have a good fallback on Pavel Francouz, who, need I remind everyone, played half or pretty close to half of the entire Stanley Cup playoffs. He was the reason we moved into the Stanley Cup final, right? So you have a very reliable Pavel Francouz should the Georgiev move not work out the way everyone was hoping to. So moving forward, then Kadri, when he leaves, I figured it. I always had that hope. I just, as soon as these signs and stuff were going on, and Gaudreau he was the first domino when he signed with Columbus. As soon as that happened, I was like, I don't think Kadri's coming back, because now he's going to validate his worth and why he deserves such a high deal. Which, more power to him. The guy had the game of his career, or the year of his career.
Yeah.
So him going on to Calgary, I kind of thought about Calgary a couple times, because they had lost Gaudreau, they had lost Tkachuk. He'd fit in really well, especially with Huberdeau up there in Calgary. So it's also very sad, because he, there was a lot of love and support on both sides, especially during that St. Louis series, So yeah, it was difficult. And then Burakovsky leaving, obviously you kind of you knew that you just didn't feel like he was coming back. I love the guy, don't get me wrong. I think he's going to do wonders in Seattle.
One of those. Yeah.
He was. Yep. So you just kind of felt like he wasn't going to come back, even though it made you sad. But then that begged the case. You now have the goalie position, which you filled early. You then had two of your second and sometimes third line forwards leave, and how you fill that. So we go out and just recently, a few weeks ago, signed Evan Rodriguez from the Pittsburgh Penguins out of free agency. What were your thoughts when that news broke? What did you feel? A little bit elated, a little bit relieved? What were your thoughts?
Good. I mean, he's definitely someone that a lot of people were pretty confident that was a big opportunity and possibility. It was kind of wild how long that lingered when you have Sakic with now McFarland as being together. You just never know, what they're going to pull out of their hat. Because what you expect probably isn't going to happen. I would imagine that they had already known that Kemper was leaving by the time they signed Georgiev. And with Rodriguez, I'm really excited for him. I think that the excitement might be stalled a little bit with preseason. It doesn't sound completely underwhelming, but I don't think he's going to be a savior, but I definitely think he's going to be at least a good filler. But we do know that he has the capability to do some big things. We'll have to see how it goes. He was playing next to some relatively big names during his better times in the season last year. So we'll see. Not that he wouldn't in our team. It does sound like he's going to be somebody that will do better playing with the top lines versus the bottom lines. So should Newhook take over and Rodriguez be stuck playing in the bottom lines, we'll have to see if he can still produce much or if he has to be surrounded by top talent in order to achieve much. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles that mentally and physically, if he can do it on the ice or if he's going to be kind of shut down with not playing those top line minutes.
Yeah, I definitely agree because he had the Pittsburgh production line around him that he was oftentimes playing with, and that often translated into him getting either the primary assist or the goal itself. So I think if, and this is just on me, and obviously we have a segment here that we'll give some line predictions here in just a little bit, but I think if you do have Rodriguez on that second line, I think that at least could keep production levels high. Now, obviously, I don't think he'll have the numbers quite like Naz Kadri did this last season, but I still think he's a spot where he could put in, you can basically plug and play, see how it goes, because his line mates, just assuming you have Landeskog, McKinnon, and Rantanen on the first line, his other line mates are still going to be Nichushkin and Lehkonen. So, and those guys,
regardless.
Exactly. Yeah. So he's not playing with anyone that's going to, where he's going to be the best player on the ice, and he has to go and show people, which obviously I wouldn't be too upset with. But I think if you have that line, because Rodriguez, from what I also heard, he's pretty okay with the forecheck. And you put that with Nichushkin and Lehkonen, who that's one of their fortes, you're going to have a wonderful second line. So I think the addition of Rodriguez is going to be great. He was one that I was pulling for as soon as Kadri signed elsewhere. I said, well, the best one out there that's kind of flown under the radar is Rodriguez, one that I wanted to see join the Avalanche. And of course he does on a 1 year, $2 million deal. So with that being said, we did see glimpses. Sorry, go ahead.
No, just with that being a 1 year, it's nice that we are not locked in, forever on that. It can be an experiment that's not going to end up being dead weight, and then we can still have the opportunity to be, deadline free agent, looking for what we might need to fill in then.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And we even got to see glimpses of him in the preseason games. And so we'll shift to the preseason right now and give our thoughts and takeaways. So obviously in this preseason, it's not, your stars are going to go out there and shine. Obviously, I think they put Makar in and all that stuff for tonight, and they're making their preseason debuts. But out there early in those games against Vegas and Minnesota, they had a lot of those, up and coming players that are draftees, prospects, AHL, stuff like that. They threw Rodriguez in there along with Comfer, Newhook, and Bowen Byram. You could tell that they had it, so to speak. Not to say that the prospects weren't good, but they just made those prospect-esque mistakes. Too many penalties, kind of the emotions getting to them, right? Which you wouldn't expect much different in other prospects. However, Rodriguez really stood out during those preseason games that I did see. Everyone else, it kind of depended on the game and on the situation, but Wanted to get your thoughts so far. Obviously, we know preseason is still going right now and will be until the end of the week, and then obviously the regular season will go. Wanted to get your thoughts real fast on this preseason. Were there any surprises as far as cuts made? People who have made the cut still going? Take me through what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so this will probably be a recurring subject throughout the year, but I have had a heck of a time trying to watch any preseason hockey. So I've been going a lot by just listening and following up with follow-up thoughts, as it's been a huge pain for me to watch anything. But I think that my biggest surprise or kind of concern throughout most of the preseason stuff, starting with practice, training camp into preseason, was when it started out, it was Ben Myers. He looks like a man amongst boys. He knows the Avs drills. He's got our systems. He looks like he's ready to go. I mean, this is our gold. And then the excitement around him has waned a lot since then. So I'm curious to see, I also don't know what kind of promises have been made to him before choosing the Avs. So I don't know how much ice time we'll see with him. I don't know. I haven't really gotten much of a vibe if the management's totally pleased with him and how preseason has gone so far. So I'm curious to see how that goes. And then on the opposite note, when it started from training camp, they were talking about how Kaut was so out of shape and he had to leave a practice early and he was laying on the ground, dog tired. And now at the end of the camp, it's like, he is the golden boy, which you've never heard. Everybody has wanted Kaut to. I mean, he's been in our system for, is this year 4?
Oh, 4 to maybe
4 or
6.
5.
I mean, he's been here a long time.
But I mean, everybody has wanted him to succeed. And I'd say for the most part, he's gotten a relatively fair shot. And
Sure.
At the beginning of training camp, he pretty much said point blank in an interview, this is probably my last shot. And then you've got Bednar in the corner pretty much like, yeah, this is his last shot.
Yeah, it kind of is.
And then 2 days later, he had to leave practice early because he was tired and couldn't bag skate. And then somehow into preseason, he's still here. And now it's looking like there's a good chance that he could be a roster guy. And the sensationalism around Ben Myers has seemed to fade quite a bit, which I don't think that he's done or anything like that. But I do think that it's not quite what we anticipated, especially with him being significantly older than most prospects. I don't know that he's necessarily considered in that prospect time, but some of the other ones, you guys will hear me talk a lot. I am this year the in-game host for the Musketeers. So anybody who's gone through the Musketeers USHL program, I will always root for extra hard. So seeing Sampo get cut, I am praying that we're looking for that new hook effect. I hope they send him down, take him off, and he comes back and hopefully finds a roster spot. 10 games in would be fine with me. But yeah, I'd really, really like to see him succeed, especially because he seemed to be doing well during training camp and then into preseason, but I'm not sure. He just doesn't seem to quite have it right now, but hopefully getting sent down for a little bit can light that fire, because clearly Newhook utilized that and used it as a driving point. So that was my other main one.
I agree with the Sampo Ranta one. He was one where he, in a couple seasons ago, they actually threw him into the NHL with the Avalanche against Vegas.
Yeah.
Right? During the playoffs. Right? I mean, and obviously I think they might have tried to get some Cale Makar magic and stuff like that, because that's what they did with him. And obviously Cale's story is history. The guy's going to be a Hall of Famer, all-worlder, right? And so I was wondering if maybe that was what their shot was for Sampo Ranta, was to try to do something like that. And he showed grit. He really did, right? I think I agree with you on that, Britt, when you say he might just be sent down to the Eagles for 10 games or so a month, whatever it is. Hopefully that lights the fire back under him so that it can be like a Newhook situation this last season, where he's like, well, I don't like it down here, or whatever he said, and gets back onto the roster and never lets it go, and ends up being a really good piece to the Avalanche puzzle. So right now, I think as far as preseason goes, obviously there were those cuts that surprised me, and I'm also on the board with Martin Kaut, where it just seemed like through those games, yeah, he got some goals. He got some good looks and stuff like that. But it just seemed like after he said that, yeah, I know this is my last year, I don't see myself, this is my last shot, essentially. It seemed like the games that I was able to see him play, he seemed to play almost frustrated, and exactly, he didn't quite have the calm, relaxed demeanor that you need to have in these situations, because it's his last ditch effort, so he's got to show and he's got to prove to people and whatnot, and so far he has. However, I don't think that level of frustration, because he does have those little ticky-tack penalties, and even though it's preseason, the coaching still sees that.
Right, especially Bednar. I mean, that's not Bednar's game, is stupid.
Exactly. He's not one to play stupid hockey. He's one that says you'll play hard, you'll play really aggressive, but you'll play clean. Right. So, and it's just one of those things that we're just going to have to see into his development on if he does get those roster spots, that last one, probably the last, fourth line, and he might even be just part of the rotating wheel of people who are on the fourth line. So that's kind of my thoughts on preseason as far as who's playing now. And obviously there is a game going on currently here, or shortly, I should say, where obviously we're now going to see the bigger names come in, like Nichushkin and Makar, Taves, and Rantanen. They're going to be playing tonight. So obviously they're going to and that's just to shake off the dust. That's all it's going to be. So I think from this point on, I think we've seen enough of what the prospects can give. The only one where I know you said you advocated for Sampo Ranta, I'm advocating for Ben Myers.
Yeah.
And only because the man, he gets called up in those couple of games late season. One of them, his first one, he scores against Carolina and against Freddie Anderson, of all people. And he just showed this drive, almost like kind of like a Landeskog when somebody boards a teammate. He's out headhunting, So I'm really pulling for him to see if he can also come back in and stuff like that. So I'm hopeful that he's part of that fourth line. I don't want him to necessarily kick people off, but I do see there might be some one week it's Sampo, or 1 week it's maybe Martin Cow, or one week it's Ben Myers.
I feel like we're kind of getting to the point where we can kind of take that Tampa mentality where the regular season doesn't mean a whole lot to us. We get to the playoffs, then we handle our crap from there. It'll be interesting to see, as much as it absolutely kills me to have Gabe out for, I've heard, as late as Christmas. Whatever's going on, he's on IR, and it sounds like it's going to be quite a while. And then with all of these something that we've had now for the last few years is kind of an abundance of good players that we don't know who's good, who should go up and down. So with these injuries, we might have the opportunity to put some people in positions. And I really feel like that at least up until Christmas, we can take liberties, and maybe we know that Bednar is totally fine with mixing up the lines in a way that you never would have. We might see Cale Makar on wing by Christmas time, the way Bednar just,
he might put him in net, to be honest with you.
But there's because there's more names with like Sedlak, and then Bleed. Also, we have several guys who could really truly become mainstays that aren't even being talked about regularly, because we do just have a lot of really good fringe players, and we're also a team clearly proven that can take fringe players and take Nichushkins and make them, multi-million-dollar 7-year. The contracts that we've ended up offering people who were almost out of the NHL 3 years ago. So
yeah,
I think with our injuries, I think that we'll definitely take advantage of plugging people in that otherwise might not have had the opportunity for.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on the injuries of Landeskog and whatnot. So it will be one of those times where you do get to see some showcases. I agree. To see, let's throw him into this game and see how he does. Because obviously you have a lot of great first, second, third lines. Maybe throw them into the fourth, see how they fare. And then if they're doing good, hot hand, always ride it,
Yeah.
And then you did mention here in the regular season, let's go ahead and move into that here. What are our expectations going into this season? How do we think that the Avalanche are going to fare? Obviously, with all these new pieces, with Georgiev, with Rodriguez, the departure of Burakovsky, Kemper, and Kadri, where do we see the Avalanche going? Do we think they could go back to back? Do we think they'll just make a deep playoff run and call it there? What do you think?
I honestly don't think that going back to back is out of reach. I think that winning the Stanley Cup every year is a huge mix of playing well and winning, but also just luck. I think a lot of it is just finding luck on your side, especially with injuries. I feel like we're in a position to be in one of the healthiest years that we've had in a long time. I certainly hope so, especially when it comes to goalies. I would like to just see a goalie play a whole season, short of maybe small injuries along the way. But if we could see one of our goalies take over and play for a full season, I feel like that stability will be a huge driving factor for us. I really, like I said, I'm not super concerned with the first half of the season, other than figuring out how we're going to wrangle the second half of the season and figure out what exact moves we need to make I do feel that we will probably have one major success story, which I'm hoping is Newhook, because it sounds like little Alex Newhook has come back this year a man, and he's ready for that. he looks thick, and he is talking like a man that plays in the NHL, not a dude that's trying to stay off of the AHL team.
There you go.
Yeah, I think he's ready for that. And I just feel like, Tampa they were almost out of playoff contention at one point near the end of the season last year. So I feel like that mentality is a fine one. Let our lesser players play so we can offer more maintenance days and figure out where we can plug those people in, and then figure out what small pieces we might need at the deadline, whether it be Rodriguez or, who might not quite meet the cut, find that spot that we need to fill. And obviously we all have full faith in McFarland and figuring out those spots that need to be filled. But I truly believe that McKinnon is even hungrier now somehow than before. I don't think that he's satisfied in any way whatsoever, especially if you listen to his media day interviews. He is no more satisfied than he was when he gave his interview last year that he hadn't won.
He almost sounded like he never won the cup to begin with.
I know,
he's like new year, fresh start. I want the cup again.
The man is an animal.
He is. He really is.
So I truly do believe that, especially looking around the league, seeing the moves that other teams have made, I don't feel that anyone has gotten significantly better. If anything, most of them have stayed parallel or even gotten worse. And I just don't believe that we're much worse at all.
Yeah, and I think it's the Eastern Conference teams. If there were any teams that got better, they're all Eastern Conference. Then in the West, I don't really see anyone taking a giant leap forward to surpass the Avalanche. So that would be my prediction: is the Avalanche still reigns supreme in the West, and they make it into the playoffs, and I think they make a very, very deep run. If not, they go back to the final, and it's totally within the realm of possibility that they go back to back. Tampa has proven that they can do it because their big thing was retaining pieces, which is exactly what we did, especially with the re-signings of Nichushkin, with Lehkonen, with Manson, even Darren Helm. He ended up being a pretty big factor in the playoffs. So I think as long as that consistency is there, and because they now know what it takes to win a Stanley Cup, and the grit and effort and the injuries that you play through to win the cup. They have that now ingrained, in their team as to what it will take. I think they're going to remember that, and I think they'll make a deep playoff run. Obviously, I want them to go back to back, right? And I totally have 100% faith that they will. But in order to do that, let's move into the segment then, Brit, about 5 key games. Brittany and I discussed this earlier before the podcast came out. We discussed some key games that we think are going to be crucial for the Avalanche's cup run to go back to back in the Stanley Cups. So why don't you go ahead, give me your 5, and then obviously I'll rattle up my 5, and we'll kind of explain why we think these are important throughout the season.
So with mine, I didn't grab the exact dates because I'm looking more for just the feelings in the season. But these earlier games, I know that it's right away, but I think that I'm kind of someone who believes in like setting tones for the season. So we've got this earlier game, October 22nd against the Knights. And while the Knights aren't going to be any kind of driving force, at least it seems so far, I really do think that that's a game where if we destroy them, it sets a great vibe for the season. For the beginning of the season, feel good to really just step on their throats. And then the other important early season game I see is right away we play the Calgary Flames. And like I said, Kadri is going to be out for blood, and Calgary was an incredible regular season team last year. So they are definitely going to be on a redemption tour. So I'm curious to see how they come out of the gate. They have shaken up their team about as much as anyone this year, especially for the upper level teams. I don't know if any other upper level team made any bigger moves than they did this year. And it'll be interesting to play against our own guy. And he's now kind of the guy for them. So, and then the other important games I see are going to be those later ones. We just seem to struggle so far at the end of the season. We have a later game against the Oilers. I feel like that's going to be a big because that could definitely be a repeat, seeing the Oilers again. And that was Oilers could have very well beat us. We do play them April 11th, right before our playoffs start. And it'll be curious to see how they kind of set that tone, if we can take them down, set that tone that we're back and we'll beat them again. And then we have a later game against the Leafs, and we have one on the 27th of February against the Knights. I just always feel like the Knights are
pain in the butt.
Yeah, even when we're not playing good, or even when they're not playing good and we are playing good, it's just like somehow they just kind of get to us. So I'd really like to see us just take them out hard. It'll be interesting to see if if you told me that they are not even in a wild card spot by the end of the year, I'd believe you. If you told me that they went out and won the President's Trophy, I could probably find a way to believe it, because you just never know with them. They'll probably just sell who knows what and somehow get something great out of it, because that's just how Vegas operates. So those late games against the Knights, Toronto, after I'd say that Toronto game was about one of the most embarrassing games. And then that Oilers game, because the Oilers, if anybody got significantly better, the Oilers might be it with this new goalie acquisition. And I really do think that if anybody was going to improve enough to possibly beat us, that's a big one to watch for. The Oilers worry me a bit, so we play them right before the playoffs start.
Yeah, definitely. There were a couple of those that I actually I'm curious to know a couple more things, but we can get into that here in just a little bit. So on my 5, the first one I have, at least going chronologically through the list, the first one I have is at Carolina, and that happens on November 17th. So the reason I put that on there is because through all the losses we had last year, only one of them were we shut out. And that one was against Carolina at Carolina. Now, I know there was a lot of hard feelings and calls that were questionable in that game, and some feelings were hurt. But Carolina is one of those atmospheres in the NHL where if you can make a statement there, and a big one at that, you can make a statement anywhere. And like I said, just because of the atmosphere alone, that gets you conditioned. And I'm kind of glad it's relatively early on in the season, so that you can kind of begin to tune out chants and the cheering of opposing fans and stuff like that. So that should be a good atmospheric conditioning game. And again, it's one of those kind of revenge factor games where you did get shut out. You didn't score a single goal. You need to go back out there to Raleigh and prove to them that that was just a fluke, that wasn't meant to be.
Was that the Freddie Anderson game where he hurt his leg, or was he in net for that game?
Anderson hurt his leg when they came back to Denver.
Okay.
And then I think that was when he got injured. It was kind of also a freak accident game as well. So
yeah, they are definitely though. So that's
absolutely. The next one I have here, let me scroll through it real fast here. Sunday, December 11th, you play at St. Louis. That's the Blues game. That's going to be one of those. I think it's the last one at St. Louis, if I'm not mistaken. But again, that's one of those ones where they have a lot of vendetta against you, especially with the effects of what happened with Nazem Kadri and Jordan Binnington. Obviously, there's sides that were picked, stuff like that. But the Blues are always one of those teams, a team that I consider in the Central Division to be the rival to the Colorado Avalanche. Just because I feel like the Minnesota thing has died a little bit. Detroit's not even in the same conference anymore. I'm seeing St. Louis as Colorado's biggest rival today. So that's going to be one of those games, and it's nationally televised. The big thing that I have concern, though, is the time it starts, and it sounds kind of odd to say that, but I remember there was the little Eastern boards, tour that we had, and there were some early games that started, and it just seemed like we were just waking up from those games. So we didn't show any kind of outing at all. We played minimally. I think we squeaked a win or two out of the 5 games that we played on the road in that little tour there, but 2 of those games were they just didn't play well, and I attribute that to an earlier start time, because obviously you're used to playing later at night. You have time to kind of get prepped and stuff like that, but this is a 1 p.m. start time on a Sunday. So that would be one that I'd be very interested to see how St. Louis preps for that game, but also if Colorado is able to learn from last year as far as preparation on an early start time goes. Next one I want to drop down to here. Let me see if I can find it. Yes. Thursday, February 9th, and that is at Tampa Bay. I don't think I need to say more than Tampa is going to be beyond mad, especially with the events of the Stanley Cup final. I appreciate that. But that's going to be a game you only play there at Amalie Arena once. In the regular season, right? You only play there once. You need to go and show Tampa once again who is the reigning Stanley Cup champion. That would be the statement game to do that, because, again, Tampa also retained a good chunk of their players, right? There were some departures that might have weakened them a little bit, but I still feel like as a whole, Tampa is very, very dangerous and still very, very good. So you'll have to go in, have a statement game, especially to declare, this, we beat you fair and square, outright. We'll do it again. So definitely keep an eye on that one. Again, that one's Thursday, February 9th. Fourth one, I'll try to speed this up a little bit here, but fourth one here is on Wednesday, March 15th, and that one is at Toronto. Obviously, a lot of away games here I'm given. The last one is a home game, so don't worry. But this is one where you went to Toronto and got absolutely embarrassed last year. Now, granted, there were injuries that had happened. We didn't really have a full slate of players. I don't even think we had our starting goalies. I think that might have been was that a Justus Annunen game? Or was that a Johansson game? It was one of those two.
Wasn't that the game? Wasn't that one of the COVID issue games? Am I?
It's
or was that the one against the Predators. I think where Jack Johnson did negative.
Yeah, that was the Nashville game. But this one, I know we were short our goalies. Francouz and Kemper were out.
I think that was when Kemper had his December glove injury, whatever happened in
something like that. Yeah. So this is one where, again, you need to go back, similar to Carolina. You need to go back there and you need to say that was just a fluke. This is the team. The problem with that being you're in March. Injuries and dings and dents have happened and will happen. So you just need to make sure that throughout the season you maintain as healthy a team as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So they do have some new players, obviously, with their goalie situation. Obviously, Jack Campbell leaving.
Yes, that's a great question, Allie. That
right
is
there.
the biggest. I think that's one of the most burning questions I have in the NHL. But they do have this incredible new signing in that of Nicholas Abe-Kubel. So their savior has arrived in the form of a $1 million contract.
Abe-Kubel.
Which they seem to really dig him so far. So we'll see. But
I wish him all the best, man. He was one of those where I was like, I just wanted him to do good in every single game, because he was brought in short term, kind of off the cuff type stuff, and he ended up staying with the team, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
So definitely one thing to watch for in Toronto. I think as far as their goalie play, though, Toronto's I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's one that, again, it's unproven. They're both on brand new teams with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So either it works or it doesn't. But in either sense, I still think you have the offensive capability and the defensive capability to make stops and to score goals.
Yeah.
So
definitely. And you know what Murray's capable of. It's not that it's never existed.
Oh yeah, the man has won Stanley Cups before.
Yeah.
So he just, if he finds his rhythm again, he's still relatively young, even though some of his pictures post him to be kind of old, but he's still very young, so he's got a lot of time ahead of him. If he figures out his footing again, watch out for Toronto, right?
Yeah, so, if they get a super hot goalie, it's definitely going to be scary.
Yep, I agree. And the last one, just a few days after that, is Wednesday, March 29th, and that one is hosting the Minnesota Wild. This one is going to be a divisional game. This one might be one of those times where, like I said, I still think the Avalanche will be first in their division, but the Minnesota Wild are, along with the Blues, they are one of those teams that are just kind of nipping at the heels of the Avalanche, and because of that skid last year in the last like 6 or 8 games, where it just seemed like Colorado just didn't care. They're in the playoffs. They got the division. They got the conference in the books. They kind of just skidded down, but Minnesota caught up.
Yep.
Not enough to surpass him, but it was still within like a, you want to monitor it type thing. So Minnesota is that game that I want to make sure that you stake that dagger into their heart and make sure that is the game that separates top from the rest in the Central Division. So those are my 5 key games to look for throughout this season. So that being said, with the season that comes in and whatnot, I think the players that need to stand out, and this will be our last segment, players that need to stand out, I only have one, and that is Alex Newhook. He has the stage set for him.
Yeah.
He's going to be that player that he needs to take the spotlight that's given to him and run, or skate if you want to go for puns. But I think Newhook needs to be that player to watch. I have full confidence in the top 2 lines for sure. Comfer, I thought about saying, but he just kind of falls into a this is your role type player. I feel like with Newhook, he has the ability to actually take a role and actually go somewhere with it.
Yes, he has the opportunity to establish himself as a top tier NHL player and avoid that kind of role playing, filling in the top 6 when needed. I mean, he has an opportunity of a lifetime right now.
He does.
Spot needing to be filled. Yep. And I really hope he takes it, because I think that he deserves it, and he's worked his butt off through adversity the past 2 years. So.
Yep, I
yes,
agree.
It was Johansson. Thank you, Avatar. That was Johansson against the.
It was Johansson. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So as far as key players, do you have anyone in mind? Is Newhook also the one? What do you think?
I mean, Newhook is definitely, I think that's on everybody's mind because it's been, are we going to bring in someone else or is Newhook going to do it? And then we didn't really bring in anyone. I mean, we're all excited for Rodriguez. And even if he didn't take over that spot, he's still not, it's not like he's going to be a worthless signing. It's still an incredible deal. But I would like to see Newhook succeed in that position and for Rodriguez to find himself a spot in the lineup. But it would be nice to have Newhook become a mainstay in that position and really, really take control of it, because with Rodriguez, we don't know if he's going to stay. And I feel like with Newhook, we have another shot at adding one more very young key to our core, when our core is, I mean, we're compared to Tampa so often, but when you consider the age of our core to the age of their core, we genuinely, we could have a 5-year cup window, which is unheard of.
It's amazing.
Time. And that's, I think people forget that when they talk about how hard back-to-backs are, we have the youngest core, I think, from the starting point of winning our NHL Cup to we have 5 more years as far as I'm concerned, especially if he can be a mainstay. Yeah,
I agree. The like I said, the stage is set for him to excel, and hopefully he's one of those players where he takes that opportunity that is given. I think him and Bowen Byram is already kind of doing that right now, but mostly Newhook, because it's about stepping up, right? Yeah. And it's about fulfilling these shoes that were left by other players, Burakovsky, Kadri, you name it. I think he can do it. It's only a matter of will he, because he's more than capable. So. For sure. Well, Brittany, this will conclude the first episode of the Cluster Puck podcast. It was a blast to do this. I look forward to doing this every week. If you liked what you saw here on the podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe to the MHRT Network, where you can get content for any other Denver sports. They do Denver Broncos mostly, but obviously here it is the Colorado Avalanche. So don't forget to like and subscribe to the MHRT Network so you can get live streams, get notified when the show goes live, and don't forget to subscribe and like and follow our Twitter page, our Instagram page, so you can get information and updates regarding the latest Colorado Avalanche news. With that being said, we hope you guys have a wonderful time watching the Avalanche. Hopefully they go back-to-back. Anything to add, Brittany?
No, that's about it. I'm ready to get this show on the road. We'll see you guys before or after our first game. We got 1 week.
We got 1 week, so we'll do. We got one show next week, and then the season begins. We'll raise that banner, and we'll get this season underway. So thank you once again for following and watching the Cluster Puck podcast. We will see you guys next week.